everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me again on this weekly business break. I am Mike Neely with Equity 401k Consultants, the owner and founder and lead investment consultant over here. And as you guys are aware, after a few of these, our mission here at Equity 401k Consultants is super simple. Our number one goal is to help businesses build prosperity and security for their employees. And as part of that mission, we put on these weekly business breaks to give crucial information to help you grow your business, insights from other leaders in the community and around us, and how we can help support your business. And so today I am joined this week by the vice president over at Jackson & Jackson Insurance, Mr. Taylor Garcia. Taylor, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I super appreciate having you. Why don't you give everybody a little bit of your background?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Mike. I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you. My name is Taylor Garcia. I'm the vice president here at Jackson & Jackson. We're a family-owned agency. It's my wife's parents' company. I'm the vice president here, so I'm transitioning from right now we're the second generation. I'll be the third generation to take over. We primarily help businesses with all types of insurance when it comes to liability, workers' comp, commercial auto, and so on, as well as helping individuals with homeowners and auto insurance.
That's awesome. And Taylor, you and I have had a couple of times to sit down, talk about the business, talk about what you guys do. I was very excited that you decided to take the time to join me today and talk about something that I think a lot of business owners have misconceptions about, especially when it comes to when they need insurance, what type of insurance they need. So I'm super excited that we're going to hopefully bust some myths today and everything all about workman's comp insurance, when you need it, why you need it, all that good stuff. So let's dive into that a little bit. What is workman's comp insurance and why is it needed when you're running a business?
Yeah, workers' compensation is really important when you have any type of employees, whether they're part-time or full-time. That insurance is there to protect them if there's a injury, a work-related injury. So anytime you have an employee that gets hurt on the job, whether you're in an office or you're on a job site, a construction site, whatever it is, that coverage is there to take care of them with any type of medical injuries.
Awesome. And, it's interesting. I've talked to, other insurance agents in the past. You and I have discussed a little bit about this. There's a lot of misconceptions about when you need workers' comp. Some businesses think that, because they have family, let's say, that works for them, it's not necessarily a need for workers' comp. Like, they maybe not on the payroll, but they're being paid under the table or whatnot, or, part-time employees, or everybody's favorite, the 1099 versus the W-2 employee. So if I'm a business and I have a part-time worker, no matter what, I need workers' comp, right?
Correct. Yes.
And if I have a family member, say my teenage son, 16 years old, let's say, is working for me a couple days a week, I need workers' comp insurance, correct?
Absolutely.
So in hearing this, a lot of business owners are probably going to be freaking out about this a little bit, but let's also talk about the differences between a W-2 and a 1099 employee. And if it's truly a 1099, why you don't need workers' comp. But let's talk about some of the tests or the distinguishing things that you have in conversations with business owners about how they classify their employees.
Yeah, there's a big misconception in this world, and it's really, you talk to a lot of people, it's very controversial because especially in the construction industry, it's very common. You see it. A lot of people think if they pay them 1099, they're not an employee. They can avoid a lot of the things like payroll taxes, insurance, and so much more, right? But then when you dive deep into what these employees are doing. They're being provided a schedule. They're being provided maybe say tools or an office space or whatever it is by the employer. They're being told when to come in and when to leave. There's a lot of things when it comes to employers, when I talk to them and they're explaining who this 1099 person is, it's everything they're explaining is an actual employee. A 1099 is, they should have their own insurance. They're their own entity. It's very different than like when you're just having somebody work for you under like as an employee. And you hear it a lot. It's a contradiction. They say, I got this 1099 employee. They're completely two different things. When you got a 1099 person and you got an employee, they're very different. And if the 1099 guy's wearing your shirt like this and he's got your brand on you, that's not a 1099. That's an employee.
Right. And, the classification over the last several years has been under fire here in California. I know that there's been all kinds of court proceedings and there's law changes that have happened to how business owners can classify their employees, whether they can classify them as a 1099 independent contractor or they have to be classified as W-2. But that matters because if they're truly 1099, then workers' comp for them is not really an issue, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And in our industry, I mean, talking to say my father-in-law, who's done this for a long time, back in the day in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they had a lot of independent contractors as sales guys, right? But keep in mind when they had those, they brought their own computers, they brought their own desks. The company, the employer didn't provide anything, right? They weren't paying taxes. They weren't doing like they made and called their own shots. But what's nowadays, well, the employer's going to give them a computer or they're going to do this and that. And that's where it kind of it tricks, right? You see a lot of realtors now being independent contractors, and that may be right because they're providing everything themselves. They're their own business per se, right? And so it really just depends on where you're working and what they're providing you. Because if there's any kind of, if they're giving you anything as far as the employer, if the higher up is providing you information or providing you a service or providing you a space or whatever it is, it can get really tricky. And I always tell employers, they may be okay with being a 1099 until they get hurt. And then they're going to come to you for benefits because they got hurt on doing something you asked them to do,
Right. Now, in our industry, financial services, for the majority of what I do, my back office that I clear business through doesn't provide me anything. I have to provide, all of it. So my computer, my office space, I mean, in every sense, I'm pretty much truly an independent contractor with just a firm behind me that takes care of compliance and clearing things.
Sure.
Where it could get sticky though is if I hire, say, an assistant and I provide that assistant my, a company computer and space at the office to be there. And then of course, then I want them on a schedule, right? So then they're truly a W-2 employee at that point. But if I bring in another advisor and I say, you got to provide everything on your own, you've got to, you make your own hours, you go do what you want. Like at that point, then they're truly an independent contractor, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there's something like that, I mean, you do still see it from time to time. But yes, if they're coming in and they're doing everything and you're paying them gross and you're just, and you're not doing that, absolutely. I think the most misconception where I'm always seeing it is, and I don't want to single them out, but typically in the construction space. We see that a lot, and they're provided tools and they're being told what job sites to go to and so on, and it's always an uncomfortable conversation because nobody really wants to pay insurance. I get it. Nobody wants to buy more insurance. But I try to advise them as best as I can, because I know, especially in that industry, if somebody's hurt, they're okay being 1099 up until they get hurt. And I try to just reiterate that over and over, because they may think that nothing's going to happen, but if there's a big injury and there's a lot of medical bills, that could really put the business in severe, dire circumstances.
Yeah, totally. And the other part is, yeah, of course, everybody that's in business, I'm sure everybody that's taking the time to listen to this today, they're in business. The goal is to make money and make a living and build something. And you want to keep those expenses, if you can, to a minimum. The problem is, though, if you don't pay for insurance in different aspects of your business and something happens, the cost to have had that insurance is much cheaper than not having the insurance coverage, right? Because
absolutely,
you have a worker on a job site that gets hurt, and there's lawsuits and everything that follow after that because you didn't provide, workers' comp insurance in this instance of what we're talking about now. Like, that's the legal fees that come with that are going to be way more expensive, and the settlement's going to be way more expensive than if you just paid to cover the employees, right?
Absolutely. And the one thing I think there's a lot of people that don't realize, even if they are injured and you try to pay out of your pocket, and I'm going to say this now for a lot of people out there, if they're listening, if your worker or your 1099 gets injured and they go to the doctor, they have to go to the hospital, and they tell the doctor it was, they'll say, how'd you get injured? Well, I was on my job site and I got hurt. Boom. Immediately when they say that they got hurt on the job, the doctor files it as a work related injury. And if they don't have workers' compensation, you get fined, because it's illegal if you have any employees to not have that. It's against the law here in California anyway. So, you do, on top of legals and the medical bills, you then get fined. And so, yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of costs involved. And I try to tell people it's not worth the risk. It is something, of course, nobody wants to pay it, but it is worth it if something like that happens,
Let's get into that a little bit. So, it's illegal not to have workers' comp in the state of California.
Right.
What is this? Is the state usually finds out about this? How? Is it usually when there's a work-related incident and there's a claim that goes through, or, how does the state figure out that, Joe's construction company, let's say, is not providing workers' comp insurance? And I'm sorry if there's a Joe's construction company out there, but just throwing that out as an example.
Sure. Yeah, technically, if you really think about it, it would really only come up at time of a claim. Otherwise, the only other times is if you're working on a job site and the person that you're working for asks for proof of insurance. They may want to see it because they know you got a couple guys helping you, right? So you may come across it in that sense. But for the state to know or that to come up, yeah, it would have to come about within a medical professional. They went to the hospital because they fell off a ladder and had a concussion, and the hospital and the doctor's treating them, and something happened, or they cut themselves, and that comes about. So yes, technically there's no real way for the state to know is second you get a employee and if you're paying them under the table. But I just advise every business owner out there, it's not worth the risk. And if you're trying to grow a business legitimately, you want to make that a legitimate business and grow and scale, it's not worth the stress of feeling like I don't want something to happen, and I try to tell people that. And we don't come across it all that often. I'm not trying to say everyone's like that, but we do come across it because they want to cut costs, of course, because they're a new business or whatever it is. And I just try to tell them, I'm like, it's not worth, maybe the workers' comp for one employee full time is $1,000 a year. Maybe it's not that much, depending on what you're doing. Now, workers' comp, of course, is all about what you're doing. If it's a roofer or a tree trimmer, it's going to be more expensive than if you're an office employee.
Right. Higher risk, right? I mean,
sure.
If the insurance company is dealing with, a riskier profession, there's a greater chance that something's going to happen to a worker and a greater chance that they're going to have to pay out on the claim. Sure, they're going to want more, as far as premiums are concerned.
Sure.
Let's kind of twist this. So how does this work if I'm a homeowner and I hire a contractor to come do my roof, right? Like I hire a roofer and the roofer comes, he's got 2 or 3 guys that work with him. Where does the liability fall if something happens? Like, let's say, you've hired these folks and one of the workers falls off a ladder and breaks an ankle, and the business owner doesn't have workers' comp for whatever reason. Like let's say he's classified one of the workers as a 1099 because he only hires them, every once in a while or whatever. Can the liability fall on the homeowner for that, or is the homeowner protected? And the reason I ask this is because, doing business and sometimes is not just limited to obviously commercial properties or commercial things. I mean, we hire as homeowners and owners of property, we hire people to do jobs for different things. So
sure,
how is the homeowner protected in that instance? Does any liability fall on them? Is that a different set of insurance, or is it always going to fall onto the business that you hired to come and do the work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Typically, 99% of the time, it's going to fall on the business owner. I have a gardener. I don't know if my gardener's employees have workers' comp or not, but you know what? It's going to fall on him if they get injured, right? I have liability insurance if something were to happen, like not to their employees, but if something happens where he trips over the business owner that I hired, trips over something in my yard, if something happens, I have some liability insurance there. But as far as the workers' compensation goes, that is between the people that work for the employee or the guy that's there hired to help the business owner. So a lot of times, a lot of people like to see they work with contractors or somebody like that are licensed and insured and bonded, just for the ease of knowing they're a legitimate company, right? They took all the proper steps to make sure they are properly protected. So where if their guys get hurt, maybe the whole job pauses, right? Because they don't have insurance to help fund it to keep going. But as far as the homeowner goes, you are basically protected. I can't find a circumstance to where if I hired a flooring guy to come in and redo my floors and he gets hurt, where they're going to blame me, right?
Right.
Because the employee is going to look at the employer and say, hey, you told me to cut this certain thing this way and I did it, and now my finger got cut off. Right. They're going to go to the employer or the guy managing the job, not me, and say, hey, you're the homeowner, it's your fault,
Right.
So
right.
It's very rare that you see people like that. And I've talked to, I've asked about that when I first got into this because I was curious, because I was like, should I be asking like my gardener and all these people if they have all this? And even my father-in-law was like, no, because you know what, I have insurance in case something happens to the owner of the business, if he falls because I had something outstanding, out that hurt him. But as far as his guys, he's responsible for the people he brings on, and I'm responsible for the owner that I hired. So, and workers' comp wouldn't fall into place at that point. If I'm looking to protect something that somebody got hurt on my property, that would be liability insurance.
Right.
But
right.
But yeah, for the workers' comp, yep. For the most part, if you hire a roofer and one of his employees gets hurt, 9 times out of 10, I mean, maybe you try to get dragged into it, but I've never seen that happen.
Right. It's interesting because I think, between insurance agents and financial advisors, our job is risk management. Like that's what we do is we manage, and though we're managing for different types of risk, in your case, you're helping business owners, manage for these risks that could cause them to be in a situation where if they didn't have insurance, they'd be out of pocket.
Absolutely.
Right. So you're helping protect assets and protect the business in that way. It's the kind of the same way in the investment world. I'm trying to help protect people from losses and help them grow their investments.
Right.
And for risk, workers' comp is just one piece of a business owner's insurance puzzle, right?
Sure.
So, Taylor, how does a business owner find you? How can they find you, find resources? Where can they go to get help from Jackson and Jackson?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we take a little bit different of approach than most people out there. I'm not going to, blanket statement that, but we like to look at it like as an advisor role. So as you're saying, risk management, we like to look at your employees. And if you've had a lot of claims, we dive deep into why you've had a lot of claims. Is it the lack of training? Is it in the employee handbook where you're not telling them that they need to have these safety precautions and have these regular meetings? So we like to dive deep into your company and say, the reason you've had 5 work-related injuries is maybe because you're not doing these regular trainings on what your equipment that that they're using. So a lot of agents don't tend to look at that. They like to just shop different prices in different markets. And again, not calling anyone out specifically, but I have run into that. So to answer your question, Jackson Insurance, you could reach out to us multiple different ways. Like I said, we do all types of business insurance, whether it's general liability, workers' comp, commercial auto. As far as business goes, you can reach us at our website. It's www.jjinsurance.com. There's forms on there, and there's a few different pages you can go to, whether you're a contractor or if you're a manufacturer, or maybe if you're just a restaurant or you're a hairstylist. There's so many different things that we so many types of businesses that we help. You can also reach out to us just via the phone, our phone number is 626-914-9944. You could always just give us a call. We're more than happy to sit down and we like to look at the full business as a whole. We don't like to look at just one policy. We say, okay, you got this. Okay, you have a truck. You're going to probably let's take a look at your auto. We like to look at the whole thing and make sure you're properly protected as a whole. We look at ourselves as more of like a piece of your business and a part of your business. We're an advisor role where we want to consult what you got as far as your insurance goes, and make it as painless as possible, because we know insurance is not always a fun conversation to have. So we like to take on that role and talk about the insurance and deal with that for you so you don't have to.
I love it. And that's one of the things that I tell business owners is, you're great at doing what it is that you do. So whether that's construction or running a restaurant or a coffee shop or whatever, you're great at that. That business, but you need a team of professionals around you to help you manage for the other areas that you might not necessarily be an expert in. And insurance is certainly one of those worlds where things are always changing, laws are always changing, and we know that here in California. And it's never getting easier to run a business in California. So having a professional and a trusted advisor to help with your insurance needs is super important, especially with the risks that are out there, specifically like we were talking today with workers' comp. It's very important. So
absolutely.
Everybody, again, that's jjinsurance.com. I would invite you also, it'll be in the show notes underneath. And of course, with the post here, go follow Taylor on LinkedIn. He's always providing great tips, great videos, definitely resources for you to think about and utilize. So Taylor, thank you so much again for taking the time to join me today. Great to have you. And I look forward to doing this again with you where we can dive into other insurance topics.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike, for having me. And like I said, if our clients are calling us and asking about all these insurance and they're having to think about insurance all the time, then we're not doing our jobs. That's what I have to say. So thank you, Mike, for having me on. I really do appreciate it.
Most definitely. Thanks, Taylor.
Thanks.